Hello.
Hello.
And welcome to another episode of
The Super Data Brothers Super Show.
That's right. I am Ryan.
I am Eric.
And we are two real-life brothers who work in the data and analytics industry.
It's true.
And we got a good one for you today, folks.
You know, Ryan, I'm so excited for today's show because, well, for one, you already gave the interview, so all I have to do is watch it. That's a pretty good one. And then another reason I'm excited for this show, because I think it's a pretty interesting topic. And, you know, talk with Matt Housley. We've had him on the show before, and I think it's going to be a really good conversation. So,
yeah, Matt is one of our, I think he's our first 3-time guest. Always very insightful to talk to Matt. So, of course, this is a live show. We do have a pre-recorded interview today, but it is still a live show. So get your comments and questions into the chat. It is more fun for us. It is more fun for you when we do that. And of course, as always, let us know where you're watching from and we will shout you out. Yep. So, yeah, the couple points of order upcoming, you will be able to catch me at Data Council Austin in March and at the Gartner Data and Analytics Conference in London in May. So that is our upcoming opportunities to meet the Super Data Brothers. Of course, when we travel with a coveted Super Data Brothers t-shirt, which you can only get by meeting us in person and getting one that way. So check out those events if you want to catch up with us. And then I think that's all the news for today, isn't it?
I think that about covers it. Yeah.
All right. So so here's what we're going to do. This is our first time doing this new show format because we actually have quite a back catalog of live interviews that I've recorded that we have yet to use other than as shorts because we make YouTube shorts and we have a TikTok channel now. And so this interview content has been published as shorts and on TikTok, but never in long form in its entirety. So I think we're going to start seasoning that into the show as time goes on, because we've got a lot of great interviews with like Ali Hughes from Count and Miko Yuck and Scott Herleman, founder of Data Mesh Learning Community. So there's a lot of great content.
And like, you interview someone from Mother Duck.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. With one of the founders of Mother Duck. So we're going to start seasoning that content into the show. But if you want previews of that stuff, of course, check us out on YouTube. Or you just search Super Data Brothers YouTube, you'll find it. And then on TikTok, Super Data Brothers, Super Data Show. I think we're Super Data Show on TikTok. I don't know.
Or something. Yeah, I'm not sure.
So you can get the short form video version of all that stuff. But the long form version of the Matt Housley interview coming up now on the Super Data Brothers show. So we'll watch it.
We're gonna watch it, and then like we're gonna discuss it, and then like discuss any questions people have after as well.
Yeah. So we'll watch the video. You put your comments in live, and we'll if you type something 2 minutes into the video, we'll bring it up when the video is done. And then we also have a short topic to discuss afterwards, which is BI just ETL for Excel? We'll bat that one back and forth. Juan,
hey JP
from Austin. Yeah, good to see you, JP. And welcome, return viewer JP. Welcome back to the show. All right, let's play the Matt interview, and we'll regroup afterwards to discuss more data goodness. Episode of the Super Data Brothers. I am live here at Data Day Texas 2024, and I am joined by superstar author and data engineering extraordinaire Matt Housley.
Thank you for that introduction. I love the introductions on your shows, by the way. It's like talking to a real journalist.
It's the acting degree, you know.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
my background.
Yeah.
Good to see you again. As always, good to see you here down at Day to Day Texas. You wanted to talk to our viewers about business value.
Yeah, so Sol Rashidi actually this morning kind of called this out too. I think we're actually on the same page, even though she said in her talk that you shouldn't make decisions about projects based on business value. And I actually think the real problem here is that the notion of business value is so overloaded.
Yeah.
Is it financial value? Is it corporate values? In other words, is it how your company behaves as an entity and how it appears to the public? That's actually a big part, potentially, of business value.
Yeah.
Is it like employee happiness? Is it long-term goals in terms of transforming an organization? Is it investing in the present in order to make a profit 10 years from now? Like none of that is really clear when we use the term business value. So I think we're still working on having better terms for all this stuff. I told you before this that I was going to interview you while you were interviewing me. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's really interesting. The most immediate thing that data teams that I've talked to when they hear this, because this conversation really blew up, I feel like, maybe not last fall, but the fall before, when interest rates changed. It's almost like the chairman of the Federal Reserve forced a conversation on business value.
And inflation and like that. Yep.
And I think what most data teams immediately think of, and this is not a wrong thing to think of, is how do I tie my data work to concrete financial metrics?
Right.
And that is important. Yeah. But I share your opinion in that business value goes way beyond that.
Yes.
And I will tell you how I've approached it over the course of my career. And that is that I kind of rely a little bit on my background in the humanities as a data person to look at, okay, who am I serving? Yeah. What do these people care about? Like, what moves them professionally? And how can I support that with data, right? And so it's their figuring out their KPIs. Okay, we got a marketing team. What are the marketing KPIs that we need to track? That's great. Right? But going beyond that to like, what is this team's goals? What are the individual leaders on the team attempting to accomplish from, in their terms, from their perspective, and how can I support that with data? And what I often found over the course of my career is if I could figure that out, if I could compel them as people with data, then they would be successful, and that success would reflect on me.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's another thing, I mean, going back to what you said about whom you choose to serve. I think in the era of, big data, as we used to call it, but really this kind of FANG company, Silicon Valley driven evolution of the data space, where now we're operating on much larger volumes of data, we're thinking about new paradigms for processing, a lot of the focus was on the customer. Right? Yeah. Except it wasn't really on customer service, it was on customer extraction. It's that whole notion of you are the product.
Yeah.
And I think one of the values I'd like to see us embrace in the data industry is actually focusing more on real customer service. Instead of just constantly trying to extract more money from the customer, can we give the customer a better experience with data instead? And we're totally capable of doing that, but it does involve a shift in mentality.
Yeah.
And often it's harder to tie like that high quality customer service to direct revenue numbers, but in the long term, I believe it generally pays off. I mean, you don't want to be wasteful about it, obviously.
Right.
But you tend to be more loyal to companies that give you a better customer service experience if you have less frustration.
100%.
And it often does lead to efficiencies elsewhere. So for example, if you have a better application interface with, I always use airline examples, largely because of my own frustration. If you have if it's easier to do something online because the data systems are operating well, I don't have to call customer service and I don't have to message with an agent. It's great to have a good experience with an agent, but why not make it easier so that that's not even necessary? And then once in a while when it is, it's a better, more focused experience.
That is such a good point. I have often thought about this and how, again, especially in the tech firms and kind of the tech adjacent ecosystem, how much of our passion and talent has gone towards making sure that people view the maximum possible number of advertisements.
Right.
And it's just so frustrating. I don't want to go too wild on a tangent here, but just looking around the world at so many things that problems we could be solving with data, and to see that maybe over the last decade or plus, the primary problem we've solved is like, how can we get more people looking engaging with advertising content.
Exactly.
So let's say you're on a data team, how much leeway do data teams have over this? And what can they do to try to steer things in the direction of like your example of providing great customer service, right? What can a data team do to help move the needle on that?
So there are some limitations around this. Let's be frank. Like if you're an individual contributor, there are challenges to trying to make priority changes above you. But I'm going to cite Sol Rashidi's talk again this morning, and there were two things that she emphasized that I want to talk about. She emphasized that, first of all, you really need to make the people above you look good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And then she also said that she started in an individual contributor role, and as a data engineer, she didn't feel like she was super good at that, but what she was really good at was translation from the technical side to the business side.
Yeah.
And I think both of these things are very important. So when you're on a data team, we have so much this utility mentality. Like my job as a data engineer is just to keep the lights on for data, to keep the data flowing. Maybe I focus on quality to some extent. Like someone gives me, assigns me to do this, and I just run and do it. And instead, I think there's a lot to be said for communicating, translating to the stakeholders and saying, hey, what if we did this? What if we focused a bit more on the customer service experience here? Because, hey, notice that these customers who have in the data, we're seeing a poor customer service experience, and they're less likely to come back.
Yeah.
It's a bit hard to measure the exact financial impact, but we're seeing it's common sense, and we're seeing it in the data. And then make it very clear, like, hey, let's try to make changes above us by helping people to look good, by helping them to have a more successful management experience by working with that team, and also translating what can I do as a data person? What can we do as a company to improve this customer service experience?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you from my career that was, I kind of shared that talent. I was never the world's greatest engineer, right? Or programmer or anything. But it was really like translating, okay, here's what they're asking for.
Yeah.
What do they need?
Right.
And those are not the same thing. And I would really encourage you, if you're stuck in a situation where you feel like a bit of an order taker, a utility,
yes,
where you're just waiting and they come to you and the business says, okay, we need this, and this, and then you deliver that.
Right.
That you start to build up the muscle of figuring out the what and the why behind the requests.
Yeah. Well, I don't even remember. I don't remember the details of this quote, but there are these quotes from Steve Jobs about how you don't necessarily give the customer the product that they want. You create the product that's according to your vision that they're going to really love, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing, like sell this idea of going beyond what the business even assigned to you to do. Obviously, you have accountability for answering to your management chain and such, reporting to people, but you can at least take the idea and sell it that, hey, we can do more for customer service by improving our data practices and making sure that they can get the analytics they need, that they can make the changes to their order or whatever they need to do very easily, and then it goes up to customer service once that fails.
Now, let me ask you, because you used the word there, product, and
Yes.
what that made me think of immediately was a very hot topic in the industry over the last few years, which is data products.
Yeah, so this is a hot button issue for me.
Yes.
And I don't know if Good Data has a take on this. I might contradict the take, but here's
Go
my
for it.
issue. I think that vendors have tried to capture the term to say, oh, a data product is like streaming data straight from your application database to analytics. Well, there are a couple of different definitions floating around. I think all of them are inadequate. I think product is a very abstract concept that has to do with creating something that people are going to find useful and enjoy. And sometimes that's a streaming database service. Sometimes it's a really good customer service experience. I think data fits into products in a variety of different ways. And, for the last 20 years, the 80s was an age of just, building cool hardware, even in the 2000s to some extent, but increasingly it's about services. And that's what data products are really about. On the consumer side, it's about giving the customer the information that they want to see, that they're going to enjoy seeing, that's useful. On the business side, it's like building internal products that are going to serve a variety of different needs. So that's my take. It's not a particular technology. It's not a particular approach. It's just any product mentality thinking that's connected with data, because data really is ubiquitous in businesses now. Yeah,
I mean, I will tell you at Good Data, we don't have, there's just not particular feature or
Okay,
table type that we call the data product. And I agree with you completely, right? It is not a thing, or it's not a fixed thing. It is a way of thinking, and you can, if you want to just have a single SQL table in Snowflake.
Right.
If you have developed it with product thinking and
Yep.
you understand the customer and what the customer needs, that can be a data product, right? It doesn't have to be a fancy feature. It doesn't have to be anything like that.
Yeah.
Now, I also know people who would argue with that, right? And they would say, no, a data product is, it's this particular technology, and it has to be interacted with over APIs, and it has to, right? And I disagree with that.
Okay, here's another hot take. It's
Okay,
related, but finish your thought.
Well, I was just going to say, I also really feel strongly when you talked about that Steve Jobs and creating the product. I'm in charge of product now at Good Data, and it's such a hard balancing act between what your users or prospects are asking for versus your vision for what you need to build. And it's very challenging, I will tell you, to continue progressing towards the vision when you have this unending flow of feature requests and this is too slow and I need this and I need that. And I think data teams face the same thing.
They absolutely do. Yeah. And it's funny. I mean, one of the jobs of a really good product manager or any manager, which often gets overlooked, is to protect the team from too many individual requests. And to kind of say, so we're dealing with an issue now with a client where there are a lot of different divisions in different countries. It's a big multinational, and every like little silo division is doing their own thing, and they're like reinventing the wheel and have inconsistent data. And it's this conversation like, we need a global product vision, and we need to start saying, all right, you can bring your requests to us and we'll assess them, but we're not going to give you everything you want. We're not going to add columns to individual databases in different places. It's going to be global and it's going to be standardized, and we're going to try to provide the resources to make sure that we can move fast, but we can't. We've got to have a global vision and not be going rogue all the time, not have an entire culture and system of going rogue, basically.
I've dealt with that too. I worked with a large manufacturing firm one time where they had bought an ERP at the plant level, right? 17 plants or something scattered all over the world. And then each plant had customized the ERP. And so now they brought us in and said, can you build a data warehouse on top of the 17 ERPs so that we can do analytics? Because currently we can't, because each ERP is unique.
Exactly. Yeah, because you can send an army of data engineers to deal with all those ERPs, but at some point it makes a lot more sense to spend the money up front to start standardizing things. And you're still going to need data engineering, but you're really going to simplify that job. Yeah, and I mean, in this case, we did it, but the reality is because they hadn't fixed the cultural problem of every plant has its own ERP, like they immediately got out of sync, to where we built a warehouse on top of it, but now this plant adds XYZ fields that are not in the warehouse, and we need it in. I mean, it's just unmanageable. Yeah, and it just leads to, not only does it lead to data engineering problems, but managing the consistency and comparing metrics and all these basic things that we want to do just becomes impossible.
You mentioned at one point you said you had another hot topic to bring up.
I actually have several, but I'll try to stick to just one right now. And it was when you said API, and that triggered me slightly, and here's why. I think after the Bezos API mandate came out from Amazon, the thinking has been like everything should be an API, right? And so to contextualize this, the API mandate, I don't know if we have an authentic copy of it, but people have leaked information about it. But it's this like letter that was sent out to Amazon saying, we're not going to allow direct database access anymore unless it's a very, very special case. Like basically in general, any request between services or between teams is going to run over an API from now on. There are other details to it, but that was the big idea. And there was an era, you probably remember this, when you had all these blog posts written about how everything was going to be really simple in the future with data, and because of APIs. And you'll just have API documentation, and the code will practically write itself, and data exchange will be really, really simple. What has actually happened since then?
Not that.
Not that. It's really complicated, and their entire huge companies built around just accessing data out of APIs.
Exactly.
And so my thinking right now is that APIs for systems make a lot of sense, right? Because every system and service is somewhat custom. You can't really standardize that fully, so you're going to have APIs. For data, it's a different situation. I think for data, we need to think about, instead of going to fetch the data from an API, the SaaS platform or whatever data source should be bringing the data to the storage. That storage could be Snowflake, it could be S3, it could be cloud storage, it could be whatever. We can have maybe 10 different flavors of storage, but really the data should be brought to the storage by the SaaS vendor. It's actually going to be easier for that SaaS vendor than even maintaining that API for data, and it's way, way easier for the consumers. And you either use like a cloud data warehouse like Snowflake again or Redshift or whatever, or you use a standardized table format like Iceberg. And this would be much, much simpler because data in that way, once it gets there, it's very standard. Like they're really, it's schema and it's no longer custom config.
I agree completely. I mean, we run into this all the time, you know, with our customers. We have a big group of customers who are building essentially data apps or embedding data apps within their SaaS application. And this is where we're always telling them exactly this, right? They often come to us and they say, we just want to directly move the API data into good data. And that's an option. But oftentimes we see that they're more successful when they are, you know, moving the data into some sort of storage format that's built for analytics. And it's very interesting, like with the API thing, and I'll just talk about, take the data mesh idea, for example. When I was reading Zhamak's book, it seems like it was really geared, everything about it, the data product and the mesh is geared for API level communication. And then she would often throw in like and SQL, right? And also SQL. And I sometimes question, like, where is the desire to get rid of SQL come from? It reminds me of people who are very passionate about the fact that English is not the easiest or best language, and like they wish we would have some other language, you know, like the Esperanto people. But the reality is, like, it's such a well-known standard. It's easy to write. It's easy to learn, relatively. And so that, I mean, I agree completely. And the idea, it clearly didn't happen, right? That we're all just, it's just going to be API level communication between services and data.
Well, and what I want to add with respect to SQL is that in many respects, it really is a very streamlined language. So I'm a math person, you know, my PhD is in math. And if you're programming in Spark, it's procedural, right? You're writing a procedure of some sort. It's somewhat declarative, but it's mostly procedural, meaning you're telling the system what to do. You do this step, then do this step, then do this step. SQL is set theoretic, and you let the compiler deal with all those details. And for most cases of data processing, that's actually a simpler paradigm. Yes, it gets awkward at some point, and I would say once you start hitting the really awkward level of SQL, then you consider using another tool. But like, to me, SQL should just be, it is, in some ways, it's kind of, especially if you stay close to simple functionality, it is sort of the Esperanto data. Because it really, it's a limited language, it's simple, it's not meant to do really complicated things out of the box. Like, stick with that and then build on top of it. I agree with you on that, and also with respect to Zhamak's book, I love her ideas.
I do too.
I think the one weakness I saw in the book is that it tends to overcomplicate data processing. And my thought is, like, if you're doing data mesh and you have software developers handling data, make it as easy for them as possible. And then maybe you still have some centralized data engineering responsible for some processing, some standardization, and they can use more complex languages.
I want to talk about data mesh for just a second. How do you, like, what do you think the state of data mesh is right now? It was obviously the hot topic before. Now Gen AI is the hot topic. We'll see what it is in 2 years. It'll be something else. But you know, where do you think data mesh is? Is it, are you aware of many deployments? What's going on?
Okay, so here's my thought. I think actually data mesh in the long term is going to be really, really successful. But I think we'll probably at some point stop using the term data mesh so much because it won't be novel. And so let's compare going back to the 1980s. And back then everyone was talking about how cool SQL was. Like Oracle came out, and then Teradata initially didn't have SQL, and then they had SQL, and everyone was very excited. And then at some point, SQL wasn't cool anymore. Like, everyone used it and you would learn it, but like it wasn't cool. And I think what's happening is the tool sets are getting us to the point where data mesh is going to be much, much easier. Because if you tried to set up data mesh on like an Oracle data warehouse, it was a huge pain and like a central management problem. If you try to do it in a cloud environment where different teams can have their data stored in different places, and it's just a question of setting access permissions to allow data sharing, now it becomes much, much easier. And so I'm hoping that we're moving toward that de facto standard where the tools just kind of take care of some of those details if you set up the appropriate organization. and data mesh will be there, but the novelty will kind of go away. I don't know.
Yeah. So you're saying it will maybe not cease to be a thing,
Right.
but
it will be the standard.
Yeah, it's just be the way you do it. Like, hey, we've got these, decentralized data sets and domains, and you're able to federate them easily because of the technology, and so you're not necessarily setting out to build a data mesh. This is just what you do.
Right. It goes back to the discussion earlier about move data to storage instead of moving it over APIs, because even within a company, moving data between teams with APIs is a huge headache. But if it's just in storage, then you can basically have a de facto data mesh standard that way.
It's something we're kind of doing in Good Data right now. We're developing this Arrow-based in-memory processing. We're like almost like an analytics service mesh.
Yeah.
And one of the big things we say is like, well, because of the way Arrow functions, you load the data into Arrow, and then we can bolt on all these services that do things without having to ever move it.
Yeah.
And it's been such a huge advantage for us building out the platform internally, and now we're rolling it out to our customers. And it's exactly that, right? Let's put the data in one place, and then we can do manipulations around it.
Yeah.
But let's not be constantly sending it back and forth.
Yeah, and I think this, the DuckDB concept of just querying data at the edge sounds very similar to what you're talking about, and Arrow was meant to accomplish something similar, and I think that concept is really, really going to be up and coming, where I don't think big data is dead. I think there's a place for it, but I think a lot of queries will just run on the edge. Data's in storage, you just pull what you need, you locally can requery it, and you run on a big database just when you need to.
I mean, the advantage is so, like, for interactive use cases, right?
Yes.
It's just
it's so snappy.
Huge.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing too is that from my perspective, a lot of the success of cloud data warehouses had very little to do with the processing engines. It had to do with the simplicity of querying and permission management. So, for example, if I wanted to 15 years ago set up an Oracle on-prem data warehouse, I would need to sign a big contract. I'd need to buy hardware either from Oracle or someone else. Need to find a data center, cooling, all that stuff. Have people to maintain it. That I need certified Oracle people to actually run the database and set it up. If I want to do the same thing now in Google BigQuery, it's just like I create a Google Cloud Platform account, set up payment, and I have a table in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like that's a huge, huge change.
Yes.
But I don't, and Jordan Tagani has made this point, I don't necessarily need the performance, right? It's just the simplicity. And so if we can find other ways of delivering that kind of really robust permission management and simplicity, then that's probably going to win the day in general.
Yeah, that's. I'm especially interested in it too when you talk about kind of WASM and in-browser processing, and the ability, like the inherent multi-tenancy of that sort of stuff is really appealing. We're getting really nerdy at this point.
Oh, we really are, but I assume the audience is a bunch of nerds.
I think they are.
Thank you, everyone, for listening here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's probably just to come full circle, I guess, to bring it right. It's a good way to wrap it up. Right?
Yeah,
full
for sure.
circle. If there's someone out there, so we started this conversation about business like value and what does it really mean. If someone kind of wants to up their game on this or engage in the conversation around it and learn what value is beyond just the ability to contribute to the obvious financial metrics, what resources are out there? What can they read? What can they watch? What can they learn to help with that?
That's a good question. So Chris Tabb and I have been talking about this a lot. We'll have more coming out along those lines. I actually think that a lot of there's kind of a divide in podcasts, right? Like there's a lot of very pedantic writing about modern data stack and such, which is fine, but maybe it doesn't focus enough on the business case for some of these technologies. I think podcasts that do a better job of linking the two sides of like the business side with the data side are really good to follow. Like I think yours is great, for example, and I think a lot of our guests that we're privileged to have on the Monday morning data chat as well are pretty good about talking about what's the point of all this, right? Like fundamentally, what is the sense of all this that we're doing? Like why are we trying to do this?
Right. Cool. So you heard it, folks. Tune into the Super Data Brothers show and the Monday morning. Your show is awesome, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so good. Cool. All right. Well, we've been going for a while. I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining us again, Matt. I think you're our first 3-time guest.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
Thank you.
so congratulations. Where can people, if they're not familiar with you, where can they find you?
Probably LinkedIn is the best place to find me. So you'll probably put something in the show notes,
Yep.
but it's LinkedIn. Someone else had Matthew Housley, so it's LinkedIn / Housley Matthew, one word, lowercase. Anyway, just do a search for me, or Monday Morning Data Chat or something like
Cool.
that.
All
I'll
right.
come up. So,
well, thanks for joining us again. It's great to have you. And
great to be here.
And thanks for watching this episode of the Super Data Brothers Show, live from Data Day Texas 2024. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll have more coming from the conference, so tune in, and we'll see you next time, folks. Bye.
Take care.
All right, there you have it, folks. Our live interview from Data Day Texas with Matt Housley, co-author, of course, of Fundamentals of Data Engineering, which is, probably it's like the biggest data book in a long time.
Based on how good that book is, it makes sense that was a good interview, right? Because I haven't watched this interview before, because I don't just in my free time watch interviews you do, Ryan. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, that was a good interview.
Yeah, well, Matt is very knowledgeable and very, I think, passionate and skilled in sharing that knowledge. So he's just a really great guest to have, which is why we've had him on the show now 3 times. I asked the question in the chat while we were talking, a couple of things, from the interview that I think maybe could get people thinking. I mean, the first one is just, do BI teams, we had this conversation about APIs. And one of the things I'm trying to figure out is, how much do the front end teams really interact with APIs, right? And at what level? Okay, and is it, do they really understand REST and how to make REST API calls, or that's kind of the deepest level? Oh yeah, we're writing our own Python to get data. And then there's kind of, okay, there's a product that really does it for me, like a Fivetran, which Matt, who joined us in the comments here, mentioned that it's his perspective is BI teams interact with APIs all the time. It's just through a product like Fivetran. Or are they not doing it at all? And are they just consuming stuff via SQL in a data warehouse?
From the analytics side of things, it's like, I don't really think it's super common to maybe if you're writing super custom stuff, you're using APIs. But as far as you said, the Jeff Bezos vision of everything's an API, in my experience, integrating a whole bunch of different APIs into a BI front end is a nightmare, right? So
right.
It's first of all, it's just not going to work very well, because then you're doing all this complicated data processing, instead of doing it the place where it should be done, in a database where it's built for it. You're doing it in an application layer or a BI layer. So then you're just kludging together these different API things. And since it's not standardized in a warehouse, it's something changes in the API. It's now I have to change 40 different reports that reference this API. So I just don't I agree with Matt when he said that the API revolution, well, as far as data, as far as it got into BI, didn't happen. I'm not saying APIs aren't huge and an important thing generally in tech, but as far as it taking over this data pipeline, data processing, I don't think it ended up working. So I agree with what Matt said about move it into a single storage instead, which makes me think it's so that's kind of going back to the data warehouse. It's the tried and true. Get it back into a single storage place where you can query it with the Esperanto of SQL, right? It worked good for a long time for a reason,
Yeah. I mean, and it really, I do think it's very interesting. I was recently talking with a prospect that we have at Good Data, and they were asking us about our semantic layer, and they said, well, how am I going to integrate my BI tools with it? And I said, we said, well, to any external system, you can integrate via SQL, and Good Data's semantic layer just looks like a Postgres database to that external system. And so anything that has a Postgres JDBC driver can query Good Data. And they were like, but we really want to do it via APIs. but
Oh,
we want you to build the API connector. Like they wanted, they said what their preference was that Tableau, that we provide to them kind of an API connector for Tableau rather than connect to it via SQL. And I bring this up because I think it actually makes the point that kind of Matt made in the comments, which is BI teams, even in this situation where they're like, oh no, we want to query via API, but they actually wanted someone to provide them that capability. They did not want to write API queries.
No. Yeah, they want a connector, an API connector that essentially makes it look like you're connecting to a database anyway.
Exactly.
Right?
That's exactly it. Right.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. And JP, commented in his case, like they don't use APIs in their BI layer, right? They're querying directly from a JS application to S3. And he would actually prefer an API in this case.
Yeah.
But that's
that makes sense because, like, remember I was talking to JP at Day to Day Texas, and like what they're doing is like instead of like using a BI tool, they hired like a JavaScript front end developer, and there's like writing charts, writing dashboards and stuff, right? So if you're doing it that way, like not actually getting like an enterprise tool, but just like building the specific things that you need, then like an API might be easier just because like the front-end JavaScript developer knows a lot more about querying via API than they probably do writing SQL.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Right. JP also asked us kind of a question, which was, what would be some of the most valuable skill sets for a team leader who manages both data scientists and data engineers at the same time, right? So he's positing if a manager is naturally skilled in one, but not the other, that it could be challenging, right? So should you have, can one person effectively manage both of these things, or should they be two separate teams? I think it can work either way.
Yeah.
What I think the most important, if you are going to be in a situation where you have kind of a cross-discipline team managed by the same person, I think that can be successful, but we have to know the why. Why do we think these two teams should be managed by one person? Is it, what advantage do we think we can get from that versus having a data scientist, someone with a data science background managing the data scientists, and someone with a data engineering background managing the data engineers? I do think there are advantages to it. I think these two disciplines are colliding in a lot of ways. Data scientists are increasingly and have always done some degree of data engineering tasks in order to prep data for data science. And I think it, in some ways, the reason it makes sense to have data scientists and data engineers on the same team is that oftentimes the data scientists build something, and then there's this productionalization issue of, okay, we tested something, we built some ML model, it's doing something, and now we need to actually take the results of that and move it into other places where it can have a big impact on the business. And so that's a reason to have them on the same team. Now, if you're a manager in that situation, I think the most important thing to do is to try to, whichever side of the house you come from, you need to resist the temptation to naturally focus on that or privilege that over the other. And you need to focus primarily on identifying the projects, the highest value projects that will utilize the full potential of your team, rather than finding projects that, let's say you're a data scientist, you're managing a blended data science, data engineering team, and you know a lot about data science. So it might be easiest for you to go out and find high value data science projects for your team to work on, and then hope that the engineers can contribute to that. But you really need to make sure that you're finding projects that justify the fact that you have a blended team, that need that blended skill set, and set your team up to succeed in that way, I think, is the most important thing.
I agree.
Well, there you go.
It's official then.
Yeah, JP says they're shipping superset next week, so it's trending.
Oh
up.
yeah. You told me that you'd like spun up like a Docker image of that. So I'd be interesting once that goes live and you've been using it for a while, how that goes. Because after we talked at Day-to-Day Texas, I looked. I spent like a couple hours poking around superset, and like it kind of seemed like a halfway between like what we were talking about earlier, the like writing JavaScript and the like actually having a BI tool. Right. It seemed like halfway. It seemed like it'd be good for like if you need to deploy like, oh, we have these needs in the company and we need to like customize it somewhat and then like have these dashboards. It'd be good for that. But like I'd be interested to see like what level of like self-service. And I know we've had lots of discussions of what self-service really means, right? But what level of like once you launch it, like individual analysts going in and like creating new content for their own departments. Like once you launch Superset, like I'd be interested to see what like the adoption is beyond just like the initial whatever dashboards you make, right? I'd be interested in hearing about that.
Yeah, Superset is an interesting one because it really comes. I mean, it has an open source heritage as opposed to almost all BI products are commercial products.
Yeah,
and if they have an open source, it just hasn't. It has not been successful in BI in general, like it has in many other parts of tech and data.
Yeah,
and so I would be very interested. JP, you should, stay in touch and let us know how it goes. If you're comfortable, maybe we can have you on the show at some point and talk about it if that's something you'd be up for. But Superset's very interesting, and I do think that when you look in like the world of BI tools. You've got these analyst-focused BI tools that we've talked about a lot, your Power BI and your Tableau. Superset is most powerful in the hands of a more technical team, a team that can write some code, that does understand APIs and that sort of thing, is where Superset really shines.
Yeah, because I could be totally wrong, but because I poked around this for a couple hours, but just like the front end is base functionality, like because I think that there's Superset, but that's run by this other company, like preset or something, like you can like sign up for the preset cloud or whatever. So I did that because I didn't feel like installing stuff. So I poked around and stuff. Like it seemed like a fairly straight, like fairly like basic front end. Like you've seen a dashboard builder, it's a dashboard builder, but it's open source, right? So like I think I read about it wasn't Uber, it was like DoorDash or one of those companies. Like they implemented, or Zillow, it was one of them, I don't remember. They implemented like an analytics like suite using Superset, and like, but that's like, okay, here's the analytics we need for whatever, for housing or whatever, and this advanced thing. And they build that dashboard. So like, I bet you people just log in and like, I don't even know if they see Superset branding. I don't know, but it's like a pre-built tool. I don't know how much it serves as a, like, oh, here's our, I don't know if anyone's like hires, like they, install Superset. All right, hire these 3 Superset developers and all they do is make dashboards, right? I don't know how good it is for that.
I think it tends to be used more in situations where you're either building some sort of like customer facing or I don't know, not even necessarily customer facing, but like a data product for a specific audience, and you want a front end.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
like a data product for like, here's what this, like, oh, we do medical. Like I could imagine like, oh, we do medical dashboards or whatever, and you sell that as a product. You build that using Superset.
Yeah.
I mean, that being a thing.
That is, and that's, with good data, like we don't, I'm sometimes surprised we don't compete with Superset more commercially, because that's one of the primary use cases for us too at good data. But we're, when you compare us to Superset, we're a little more, we have a little more infrastructure built up around it.
Yeah. Well, I like it. Superset, I don't think it has doesn't have much of a data
right.
A data modeling layer.
Right.
I read a blog from like the Superset people, and they said like, oh, we're like, because semantic layers became a thing people started talking about again a year or two ago. And they said, oh, we're, they defined like, oh, there's like heavy and thin semantic layer. We're a thin semantic layer. And what they were actually describing was the fact that you could like create calculations for columns.
Right.
I'm like, that's not really that's not a semantic layer. Yeah, they exist at the
it's an Excel formula.
it's a last mile semantic layer. It's like, That's a good way to write a blog post saying yes we have this without really having it.
Well, you want it for SEO, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
like anytime. This, right.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's a last mile semantic layer. I'm like, okay, you know, I guess you could phrase it that way. You could just say it's doing a calculation on a column in the BI layer.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's our industry, right? Is like it's constantly coming up with ways to apply new and exciting terminology to capabilities that have existed for decades.
Yeah.
And so, even the semantic layer itself, which we talk about all the time in the show and we're fans of. I mean, if we're being honest, like you could forgive someone who's entered the data field in the last 5, 7, 10 years for thinking that the semantic layer was just invented.
Yeah.
But I mean, back in the day, it's been around forever.
Back in the day, they called it a data model.
Yeah, we didn't call it a semantic layer.
You called it a model. And like now, if someone just says model, they probably mean some like machine learning thing that like spits out an analysis, right? And semantic layer is what we, now the thing that contains all the definitions and joins and all that stuff.
Yeah, right, right. Now it's a semantic layer. It's not a data model. Even the this is just the conversation around data modeling has been so interesting. Like what Joe Reese is doing with his new Substack, which you should all check out. Joe's Substack is really interesting. And Substack has like a kind of a Twitter competitor built into it now a little bit. And Joe's actually using that. There's a very interesting conversation that Joe's leading on data modeling on that Substack. But it's another one of those things. We're kind of in this everything old is new again cycle of data right now. I think now that if anything, it's that the big data era has been so fully.
That lemon's been squeezed. So
well, yeah, right. I mean, like that way of
blood
thinking,
from that stone.
No, it's just been right, and it's just been so fully integrated into the way we do things. Mm-hmm. That and I don't mean and not in like a tooling sort of way, like Hadoop is clearly, not much of a going concern at this point. But just that way, the fact that the big data way of doing things has been so fully ingested into the industry that kind of the things we did before that, suddenly the value of those is becoming more apparent, I think. Another thing that Matt brought up in that conversation that I thought was pretty interesting was this idea of data products. And I really, I was thinking about that too, as someone who both has a data implementation background and I've been on the product thinking for data train since maybe 2018. But now also manages a product team that I really wonder, like data teams that want to embrace product thinking, I think have a very big mindset change ahead of them.
Yeah.
Because they really are, most of them are a service organization right now. And the thing about product thinking is great product managers know when to say no and are comfortable saying no. And that is not something most data teams that I've worked with do, right? What they do is they might backburner something.
Yeah, they might say no by putting on a backlog that they will never get to.
Exactly. Right. That's the way they say no. But they're not used to like really proactively managing the data practice in a way that is not just taking orders from end users and sponsoring executives. And that is really a mindset shift that they'll have to make in order to really embrace product thinking, because product thinking is very different. And there is this Apple element of like, you're asking for X, but you know what? We're actually going to give you Y and you're going to love it.
Yeah. Ford did it first.
It can only come in black.
Yeah. Hey, it can only come in black. What was that Ford quote? Like if I made what people wanted, I would have made a better carriage. Better carriage for horses.
Well, it's true. And you can see like the initial designs for cars were all motorized carriages.
Yeah. That's actually true. He did. I guess he did make a better carriage in a way. The horseless carriage, that's what they called it. Yeah, and then for like data products and like product thinking, like on the analytics side of thing, I think like earlier in the year we were using the term like I think like a first step, like to conceptualize it for data teams, is like the franchise model.
Yeah.
Of analytics. That's how I've conceptualized, and like at my organization, how I've talked about it, like the franchise, like just like the first step of being like, okay, what do we actually offer, right? You know, as like what work have we already done that we can put into a catalog or a brochure or package it up nice so that we can be like, hey, look, you want to query the finance data? Look, we made this nice finance semantic layer, this nice finance data model, like, you know, advertise, hey, here's what we do. Here's what data exists. Here's what data has already been modeled. It's like create your franchise, right? I think that's the first. That's why I've been like trying to move my team towards, like piece at a time. You know, first I'm trying to like define everything we do since I've taken over, and then like my next step is to like, okay, share that with everyone else. Like, we've already done all this great work. Here's how you can tap into it. Look how sweet we are.
It's amazing how bad some data teams. I mean, it's so many data teams that I've worked with and that I've been on. You get so many requests, and they're for stuff you already have.
Yeah,
and it's maddening because you think, we already have this data. The worst is when someone comes to you, like the most classic BI, and this will transition us to, I think, the last topic we want to talk about today before we wrap things up. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning in, and thank you for Matt for being such an awesome interview.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, put them in. They can be a little off topic. That's fine. They can be.
We'll talk about anything. I mean, career advice, whatever.
We've talked about Superset for 7 minutes.
Right.
Thanks, JP.
Well,
I actually kind of wanted to talk about Superset since I spent time looking into it. So I'm glad you brought that up.
You know, I did a poll at one point on LinkedIn. What tools should we review? And Superset actually won the poll. Yeah. So
I'm going to dig into it some more then.
If it weren't so much effort to make BI tool review videos.
Yeah, that QuickSight one, that took me like 2.5 weeks of like, because to do a BI tool review video, you actually, you need to learn the tool.
Right.
To a capacity that you could probably get hired to do the tool.
Exactly.
Right. After doing that 2 weeks deep dive, I'm like, I could get a job doing this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
After doing that, I actually saw someone post on LinkedIn. I'm not sure who it was, saying like, yeah, BI tool reviews are all terrible because it's either like the vendor, right? Mm-hmm. It's either like someone who's so bought into it that they're going to tell you it's the bee's knees no matter what, or it's the vendor, right? Yeah. That there's no like third party, like, hey, this tool's good for this, not good for this, you know, use it if you want this, but otherwise don't, you know?
Yeah, there really isn't. And I think that's one thing we definitely could do. Of course, you would have to do the reviews because I work for a vendor, you know, so like nobody's going to believe me.
I'm going to trust you.
Right. Before we leave the topic of data products, I just, so this may freak everybody out because everybody at Good Data thought that this was like a background. And then one day I walked through that door. And
oh, really? They thought it was like an overlay.
Yeah, they thought like this.
So the lighting is so good. They're just like, oh, that can't be really be his background.
But this book. So this book right here. When I mentioned I got into like product thinking for analytics, it's because I actually got put in charge of a very small software team at PM Square when when I was there. And I didn't know anything about running a software team or building software products. So somehow I found this book, The Lean Product Playbook by Dan Olson. And I read it and I said to myself, why aren't BI teams thinking this way? Because it just seemed so well tailored to delivering highly useful, usable software products. And it just seems like I thought BI teams should embrace this mode of thinking. And of course, it's really taken off since then. Now, you know, so I recommend this book. You may learn a lot from it. You know, not all of it's going to apply to data teams. And obviously it takes a lean approach, which is a thing. Maybe you don't want to do lean, but this book was really eye-opening for me. I'm sure there are lots of other great product books. I'm sure there are now books about data products. But when I read this book, there weren't specific data industry targeted
Yeah.
books about this sort of thing. So just a recommendation there. Okay. Last topic before we wrap up today. I posted this on LinkedIn. It's gotten quite a decent bit of traction, but here's the hot take for the day. Maybe BI is really just an ETL process for Excel.
It sure it sure can feel like that sometimes. And sometimes it actually is. What if things are going strangely, then sometimes it literally is an ETL process, right?
Yeah.
I've seen the BI layer act as an ETL, feeding back into either a database that another tool uses, or directly into like some external, like sending data to some external tooling that's using it.
I'm sure there have been cases where BI generates a report, the report is exported to CSV, and the CSV is loaded back into the data warehouse that generated the report.
Oh, I'm sure of it. Oh, I'm sure some like external, like, some external system, system used by another department needs something, and they reach out to the BI team, and the BI team says, how can I do this using the tools I have and the knowledge I have? Well, I can export it. I can write a report, go to CSV, talk to the data warehouse people, say, hey, can you load this into a table? I'm gonna send it to you every Tuesday at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
And then they do it, and then it's back in the warehouse. When really they could have just created that's why everyone asks for tables.
Exactly. It's the most popular object in any BI tool. And I think that BI people just need to embrace this. I know
I've accepted it.
It makes them very frustrated. It used to make me very frustrated. I had my come to Jesus moment, I think in 2016 or 2017, where I just decided I was going to give up ever trying to convince someone not to export to Excel. Do your best to learn why they're exporting to Excel. Oftentimes, they're going to be doing some manual data manipulation that you should be doing in the BI tool. You could save everybody a lot of time and make your overall data environment better. So I'm not saying don't ask why. I'm not saying don't try to eliminate unnecessary Excel work, but this is just an unwinnable battle.
Yeah, if you can have if they're like, oh, well, I always filter down to my department. If you can, depending on the capabilities of the tool, provide a filter for them that they can select their department, or do row level security if your tool supports that, right? So that's a conversation, because they're still going to export to Excel, but if you can remove the first 10 steps of their manual process, and that's a win, right? They will be so happy with that, you won't believe how happy they will be with that, even though they're still just getting an Excel file.
Yeah. And there's real advantage to be gained for an organization that is using Excel files that has a foundation of accurate Excel files to build things off of.
Right. That Excel file is the end product, not a step in the process.
Yeah.
Right. You want the processes, the enterprise processes, to be happening inside tooling somewhere. You don't want the process to be happening in Excel files and transforming Excel files more than whatever an individual analyst might do. Let's see.
Yep. Got another comment from Carl. He says, selling products to customers and doing fulfillment is very hard. Yes. Messy, complex. What you're seeing is the jagged edge of selling widgets to customers and trying to build, source, deliver, and invoice it. Absolutely. Yeah. It is very different. It's just it's very hard. And product thinking is very hard. And doing it well is very hard. And there's a lot of, we talk a lot about this show about turning your analytics program into the metaphor I use is of the tree, and the tree has a circulatory system, and, nutrients go up and energy comes down, whatever. You can call it whatever you want, a supply chain, but it's got to be two ways. Successful companies that build successful products both have a vision for what they're going to deliver, but they're also reacting to both the market and their existing customers and prospective customers. And many data teams, I think, are not used to that way of thinking. They, orders come in, and then they ship out what they were asked for. But that kind of the loop of learning from what you shipped out and incorporating it back in is something they're not used to doing. And then JP says, currently started grouping sets to create
Yep.
Optimal pre-aggregated data set in hopes of minimizing BI tool query writing. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
That's the dream, isn't it?
Yeah. If you can do it, if you can, well, yeah, the dream is you'll just have like a whole bunch of data sets, like tables in the warehouse that just has like everything you need for reporting, and then you don't have to transform anything. But like, no, JP, that's definitely a step.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
All right. So what do
I
we
think we're
got
at the end
coming
here.
up on deck? We got some cool stuff that I want to make you all aware of coming up. So next week, Thursday, the 29th, we have Scott Herleman, founder of the Data Mesh Learning community, a very active dude in the data community as a whole. And the topic will be data mesh. Is it dead? Or a long-lived data mesh? Which one is it?
I'll determine which one is more clickbait, and I'll use that one.
It's probably dead, right?
Is it dead? Like our very first show was is Tableau dead? And that's like that was like a cannon right out the gates right there with that one.
Yep. So we'll have Scott Herleman coming up, and then we're going to be doing. We're going to be unboxing all of these. Okay. So these are. Let me just make sure I give all the correct attribution. So Nicholas Kelly has made all of these awesome card decks, data storytelling cards, dashboard wireframe cards, advanced chart expansion pack is an expansion pack for the dashboard wireframe cards. So when we do a live unboxing, all of these things, I'm super pumped for that. We've got that coming up. We've got some interviews coming up with a fractional CDAO, who will be giving us war stories from the data C-suite. So lots of cool stuff coming up. If there's someone you want to see on the show, let us know. I will reach out to them and try to get them on. Yeah.
Ryan, those data cards, we're going to unbox them, but keep in mind that pie charts are not legal in tournament play.
That's right. Not legal in tournament play.
There was a ruling recently, not legal in tournament play. You can do it in like too friendly for. They just bog down the game. The ruling on them is the rules are confusing for them. They just bog down the gameplay. So like it's just to keep the game alive. They decided to ban pie charts from visualization.
When we were at Count, when I was at Count, our engineers refused to build a pie chart into the tool. It was one of the number one feature requests.
Pie chart, please. It's like just use a bar chart with 2 bars.
Yeah, exactly.
If you need to do it, use a stacked bar chart.
Whatever you got to do, just avoid that pie. All right, cool. Well, I think that wraps it up for today. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. As always, we are here most Thursdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Yep. Tune in next week for Scott Herleman. Very excited for that. Any last words for the people, Eric?
No, I think that's it. Thanks for tuning in. I think it was a good show. I think it was a good interview. I think it was a good discussion afterwards. I think it was good audience participation. I think it was a good show. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Yep. And if you're on a BI team, keep those spreadsheets flowing, baby. All right. Until next time, I'm Ryan.
I am Eric.
And we are the Super Data Brothers. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.